Good morning, everybody. I think we'll get going. It's just slightly past the top of the hour. So thank you very much for attending this session, introducing a sales compensation program to your organization. My name is Mike D'Amico. I'm the HR practice leader for Stratford Managers Corporation. Just to give you a quick little bit of my own background, aside from leading Stratford's HR practice, I have prior in-house HR experience with organizations in the biotechnology, software, and high-tech industries, and have worked in all areas of compensation, including sales compensation. So hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit of that background and experience with you today. Uh, just a little bit of quick housekeeping. Everybody is muted right now, but you do have the ability to send any questions you'd like through the chat facility. Please send those to the presenters. And if there's time remaining at the end, we'll hold questions till the end of the meeting and answer those then. This session is essentially a repeat of a session I delivered at World at Work's Total Rewards Conference in Minnesota last month. And the session went the full hour, so I'm going to jump right into things to make sure we have time. I've slimmed it down a little bit to leave some room for questions, but want to get moving on that. The session agenda, here's what we're going to go through. The first part will be looking at just how do you know when you're ready for a sales comp plan. So as the title might indicate, the context of this session is for organizations that don't have a sales comp plan and are looking at bringing one in for the first time. So we will talk about how to assess whether you're ready or not. Some of the other key areas we'll look at is how do you make sure you're engaging key stakeholders in your organization. We'll run through some of the key design considerations that you're going to have to think about when you're putting a program together. We'll look at transition considerations as you move individuals that may currently not be on a sales comp plan onto your new program. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of developing a pilot program if possible when you look to first launch your new initiative, and then talk about how to prepare to administer the plan as you get into full implementation mode. And at the very end, there's an implementation tip sheet. I'll mention now that if you're interested in getting the slides from this presentation, please feel free to email me and I'll send those to you. And with that, let's continue to move along. Just briefly about Stratford Managers. I mentioned I'm leading the HR practice at Stratford. Stratford's a management consulting firm that's been up and running since 2008. We have practice areas that are essentially aligned with all the main functions you would see in an organization. We've got strategy, marketing, sales, finance, intellectual property, business operations, digital transformation, and human resources practices. One of the unique aspects of Stratford is that our consultants are almost all predominantly very seasoned and accomplished senior managers in their discipline. So rather than getting a new business graduate coming to help you out when you deal with Stratford, you're typically going to get somebody who has worked in that area in a senior or executive role. Stratford can provide not only advice on how you can deal with your current issues, but we also have the ability to roll up our sleeves and help you with implementation and operations. And again, that comes from the in-house experience that our practitioners have. Stratford focuses on customer satisfaction and relationship building and really want to try to establish partnerships with the organizations that we work with. We're located with offices in Ottawa and Toronto and have clients all across Canada. So with that, let's move forward and start looking at judging, are you ready to bring a sales compensation program into your organization? If you answer yes to these questions, then it's probably a good idea for you at least to start thinking about this. So do you have a corporate strategy that focuses on revenue growth? Do you have roles in your organization that are externally focused on generating revenue? So where the main purpose of the role is specifically to get out there and generate revenue for your company. Do those roles interact with customers, and do they have influence in the buying decision? If you're answering yes to those, do you want to incent and focus the behavior to support our revenue strategy? So if you feel you can answer yes to those questions, then you're probably in a situation where a sales comp program is going to make sense for you. Now, I mentioned that the context of this session is around introducing a sales comp program. So from that perspective, it's fairly sales 101 for the most part. So if you've joined looking to get some real advanced compensation plan design techniques, we're probably not going to get that deep into things. But I recently did an interview for SHRM, which is the largest HR association in the United States. And one of the questions we talked about in that interview was, um, how do good companies refresh and look at their sales comp programs on an ongoing basis? And the answer to that is absolutely. So a lot of what we go through here as part of introducing a sales comp program are relevant to organizations that also have programs in place, and making sure that you're managing these basic fundamental aspects of a sales comp program to keep your existing program fresh and relevant and doing what you want it to do as well. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to also point to a case study company as an example of how some of these aspects get applied. So this is an organization that we worked with who they were had a revenue target of over $100 million. They're a tech company. They generated revenue through product sales, product licensing, and also a service organization, yet they never had a dedicated sales comp program. Their individuals in their organization who had sales-related roles were all still part of the corporate program. So we worked with them to introduce a sales comp program that is now fully in place and working well for them. So I'm going to point to this organization's experience as we go through this, just as an example of how you would apply some of the decision making that needs to get made, and to see how they went about structuring and putting in place their first sales comp program. So one of the first things you're going to want to make sure you're doing when you're considering putting in place sales comp is really identify who your key stakeholders are and get them engaged throughout the process. First and foremost, it's going to be your senior management of the organization. They're going to be needing to be involved in decisions throughout the process, but you're also going to want to have them acting as champions for things as you move forward. So you want them involved throughout to make sure that you're able to understand all their perspectives. And one of the number one reasons you implement a sales comp plan is to enable and drive the corporate strategy. So the senior management team obviously play a very significant role in providing the insight you're going to need to be able to do that. If you have a board of directors or a compensation committee, you're typically going to want to get them engaged, at least to make sure you've got full transparency around what you're doing. Most compensation committees have a governance role around incentive compensation. So it's going to be important that they understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that you're able to obtain insights and perspective from that point of view as well. Once you get to the design aspects and you're starting to look at how you're actually going to roll things out, the finance department are an absolutely key stakeholder in the process. They're going to be playing a very significant role around revenue forecasts, around setting quotas and commission rates, administering the program, identifying when revenue has been recognized, often involved with the payouts to your reps. So you're going to want to get them involved right from the start so that they understand what the role is in the process for them on an ongoing basis, and also to get their input and insights into design considerations. Similarly, the human resource department often are the ones who will play a heavy administrative role in the ongoing management and administration of your program. Most of your compensation expertise is going to probably be residing in your HR department if you do have that in-house. So they're going to play a significant role in setting up the compensation plans and also in administering it. And you're also going to want to involve sales staff. There's going to be insights you're going to gather from them throughout the process. There's obviously a key communication and change management initiative that's going to be involved in transitioning to a sales comp program. So involving and engaging them at the front end is only going to help lead to a successful outcome. So just quickly, a couple of the real noteworthy main differences between people that would be on a corporate sales or corporate incentive plan and a sales incentive plan. Typically on a corporate incentive plan, you're going to see individuals who have limited customer contact for the purpose of generating revenue. Whereas the individuals that you're going to move on to a sales plan, they have a high degree of customer contact, and it's very much a role where there's persuasion and influence into the buying or purchase decisions. So that's one of your obvious criteria when it comes to identifying who do you want to have participate in your sales comp plans. Those that are on the corporate program, usually their base salary makes up the vast majority of their earnings. Whereas when you move into a sales comp plan, you'll see typically a much higher split between sales incentive and base salary. So the base salary is a lower percentage of total compensation. This then also provides a higher degree of leverage or upside opportunity through incentives for a successful salesperson. When you're dealing with compensation in the corporate world, compensation is administered on base salary with a smaller additional bonus amount available. So when we say administered, those in your HR department who are working on a compensation responsibility, they're benchmarking compensation, they're putting in place pay structures, they're making compensation decisions all around having competitive base salaries that align with your compensation strategy. In sales comp, you're administering on what is called total target earnings. So this is the total amount of base salary plus your incentive at target achievement. So you'll hear terms OTE, on target earnings, or TTC, total target comp, often used when talking about sales incentive plans. So for sales comp, when your comp person is out there benchmarking where to position somebody versus the market, they're not looking at base salary typically. They're looking at that total target earnings number and working from that backwards. And then finally, in a corporate incentive plan, payouts are typically driven by company performance. So at an individual level, there's a less of a line of sight to how individual actions may be driving that outcome at a company level. You're usually going to try to cascade goals down to create that line of sight for individuals, but the payout results are usually based on company financials or things more at the macro level of goal. For sales comp plans, the emphasis is often on individual performance goals and targets. You're setting up individual targets for somebody who's on the plan and trying to incent and drive behavior to achieve those targets, which then is going to drive hopefully a positive result on your sales strategy. So those are the main differences between the two programs. So the key design considerations that we're going to look at as we go through the rest of the presentation. What are your salary incentive splits for your program? So as I mentioned earlier, there's a much bigger emphasis on the incentive piece in sales comp. One of the fundamental aspects and decisions that you're going to have to make is how big of a difference are we going to go to? You're going to look at whether you want to go with a quota or a commission system for your program. We'll talk about caps and thresholds as far as deciding the earning opportunities for your participants. Whether you're gonna administer your program on a quarterly basis, semi-annual, or an annual basis, and we'll talk about what are some of the considerations in making those decisions. We'll talk about goal setting, the number of goals that you would typically want to try to utilize, how to avoid goal conflict and goal dilution in that process. And then some of the other design considerations we'll look at are the use of accelerators, clawbacks, and something called draws. So with that, let's move into looking at some of those considerations. So one of the big ones you're going to need to talk about is the salary and incentive split that you're going to make available. So because sales comp provides more of an incentive component to an employee's earnings opportunity, it's said to be more highly leveraged. It's providing more earnings upside. So as I'd mentioned earlier, sales comp is typically administered on either total target cash, referred to as TTC, or on target earnings, referred to as OTE. So this essentially equals base salary plus target incentive. So target incentive being the incentive that would be earned if the individual achieved 100% of their objectives. When you're administering that, you're not going to include other things such as special bonuses, any perks or other payments that may come as part of a sales program. You're only looking at administering on total target cash. The split is really a decision to make in-house. You'll typically see uh, organizations where you've got sales reps that you consider to be more in a hunter mode. So they're really out there trying to find new business, new clients. Um, a lot of it is, seeking out those opportunities and hunting down new business for the company. You'll usually see a higher percentage towards the incentive component of the TTC. So often in startups, organizations, almost all sales reps are in hunter mode, and you'll usually see in that type of environment 40 to over 50% sometimes of the compensation available being on the incentive component. As you get to become a more mature company, you've got an established customer base, you start getting into the situations where revenue needs to be defended. You're trying to maintain and retain customers from your competition. You'll hear the term farmers in these situations where you're trying to farm your client base, keep them happy, and keep repeat business coming from them. In a farmer type environment, you'll usually see less pay at risk. Typical numbers are more in the 25 to 30%, and it can even go down from there. So there's usually a little less earning upside opportunity through overachievement on your comp plan. So some of the other things that would go into your decision around whether to go with a higher or a lower percentage of salary towards the incentive. You're going to think about the sales cycle in your business. So do you have long sales cycles that sometimes can extend beyond a year? What's the type and nature of your business that you're in? Do you have a long selling cycle? Also, do you have customers who are coming back to you frequently throughout the year? You're also going to want to think about the unintended consequences that come based on the decisions you make in this piece of the design process. So I think we've all seen the examples of going into potentially to buy a car or into a retail environment and very quickly being able to identify when you've got salespeople that are on a very highly commissioned sales comp program. They almost tackle you at the door as you're coming in sometimes. You sometimes see reps fighting over clients versus going the other way where you have somebody with too little incentive component and it's challenging to get the salesperson to come out from behind the desk to give you any help. So you want to think about the unintended consequences that can happen as well based on the size of the split you use. Another decision you're going to want to make is whether to go with a commission plan, which is where a rate or a percentage is given to the rep on each sale. Commission plans are very straightforward with clear lines of sight between the action and the payout. So the individual who's working in the sales role, they know right away that if I sell this object, I'm going to get a certain percentage or a certain dollar rate or a flat fee, and they know right away the connection between my behavior and the payout result. It's easy to understand. It's very nice and clear and simple, and the rep will be able to equate their immediate earnings to what performance they achieved. There's a few basic types of designs. You can go with a straight or flat commission where each unit that is sold or each piece of business that is done provides a straight commission return or a flat dollar amount return. You can go with ramped commission programs where once a certain level of achievement has been obtained, you will see the commission rate change. Or you can go to some variable commission rates. These can be used sometimes to provide a higher commission for a more difficult to sell product, for example. Some of the negatives of a commission program, you can get what's called a slamming environment. That's a bit of jargon you'll hear in the sales word, where the rep sells the product just to get the incentive and then pays little attention to the fulfillment of the sale or collection of customer payments. They've done their piece and they're not worried beyond that. You also may lose ability to drive particular behaviors because all the salesperson is focused on is getting the most sales or commissions that they can get. There's usually also a first commission pays usually from first dollar, meaning there's no minimum threshold of achievement that needs to be done. But it is a very good tool for creating a very sales-focused culture, and the company is able to do much easier planning around this because you know exactly what you're going to be paying out for X amount of revenue just based on a formula. Sorry, my slide is hung up here. Okay, just one sec. So in a quota program, sales reps have to achieve a certain performance target or quota that to determine what their level of payment is going to be. It's typically used in a little bit more mature situations where there's a history of performance that can be drawn upon, because a really important aspect in a quota-based sales plan is your ability to forecast and set targets. You're going to want to be able to determine, what sales quota or target do I want to give to my reps? How am I going to work this up to achieve the total sales and revenue plan we have for a company? And your ability to be good at doing that is often drawn upon your ability to call upon a history of performance to understand what you're likely to do. In a quota environment, you'll often hear the term buffers utilized. So this is where you work down from your corporate revenue plan and build in a little bit of extra quota or target as you work your way down into the organization, so that you've got some buffers in place so that if some reps don't meet their quota, it doesn't mean that the total company result isn't going to be achieved. So you may see a company with, let's say, $10 million revenue target, and they've got two regional sales directors who each have maybe a $6 million quota, and the reps below that director may have their quotas adding up to $7 million each. So in total, you've got $14 million in quotas out there to try to drive that $10 million company revenue target. An important aspect, though, when you are using buffers, is you also need to balance that with keeping your quotas reasonable and attainable for your reps. If you're setting such high quotas that they have no hope of ever achieving those, that's going to have negative consequences on the behaviors that you're typically getting out of your reps. And there's a lot of different things that could go wrong because of that. You could have high attrition in your sales organization. You could have people who are giving up partway through the year because they know their targets are unattainable, things like that. So setting quotas can be challenging if you don't have enough data. If you're going to try to get into things like having targets for new products, new territories, or trying to forecast sales growth. And inaccurate targets can result in you paying out too much or too little, and both of which are going to create issues in the organization. One other aspect of setting incentive comp that I should mention is when you're determining the split between the sales comp component and your salary, one of the things that you can look at is doing a fixed amount or a variable amount. So a fixed amount would be every person has the same $25,000 incentive target, for example. That's called a fixed variable compensation. Variable would be where everyone may have a 40% target, but because of different salaries, the actual incentive opportunity is different. I apologize, my slides are a little delayed here. So I just quickly to point to the case study example that I referenced earlier. The organization chose to go with either a 40 or 50% variable target for individuals, depending on their role. So they went with a quota program. They felt that they had a level of maturity. I mentioned that they were up in the area of $100 million revenue already, that would allow them to do the kind of goal setting, revenue forecasting, and quota setting that would work in a quota environment. They also had a fairly aggressive growth plan, and therefore they went with a pretty aggressive plan with either, as I said, 40% or 50% individual incentive opportunity. So another design feature you need to think about are caps and thresholds. Caps are where you're going to put a limit on the maximum amount of incentive payment that could be earned by an individual. The reason for doing this is to mitigate risks of huge payouts, for example, in a windfall situation where maybe a mega deal falls into the company's lap and it would result in very, very large payouts to sales reps. There's some organizations that just don't believe in doing that and will put a cap on a plan to have a maximum amount that can be earned. Other large organizations, particularly public traded companies where executive compensation must be disclosed. There's scenarios where some of the top sales account reps in an organization in a fantastic year could actually be earning money comparable or more than some of the top executives in the company. And there's certain organizations that do not want to have to report that in their annual proxy. Some of the negatives with putting in caps is it can certainly demotivate or dissatisfy the employee who feels, you know what, I've done what you asked me to do and I've earned that payout. Why won't you allow me to get it? What you might see sometimes is a compromise situation where payouts get decelerated once a certain overachievement level has been reached. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. At the other end of the spectrum are thresholds. And this would be where a certain minimum level of performance needs to be achieved before any payout can happen. So for example, you may set a 60% of quota as a threshold, meaning that if my rep can't make 60% of the quota that we've set for them, that is such a disastrous result for us as an organization that I am not willing to pay out any bonus compensation for that level of performance. So you'll want to think very hard about setting thresholds. You'll want to look probably at past results. You'll want to have a good understanding of the precision you feel you've got in your quota setting process so that you don't set a quota that is really unachievable and you've got a threshold in place that is going to kick in as a result and you're really demotivating your sales staff. A commission plan, on the other hand, I mentioned earlier, they typically don't have a threshold because essentially payments start from first dollar earned. So unless the rep has zero revenue generated during the year, they're going to get some form of incentive compensation. So these are both very philosophical decisions that need to be made. And again, going back to some of the key stakeholders, you're going to want to engage senior management in this. This may be something you talk about with your comp committee, and certainly probably want to talk about this with your sales leadership team to understand the pros and cons of putting these types of features into your design. Another design aspect is something called an accelerator. So an accelerator is a tool that can be used to incent behavior through increased bonus opportunity. It's often used to motivate sales staff to keep pushing even once they've reached their quota target. If you've got a program where once you've reached your target, you're going to get a dollar for dollar or a 1-to-1 ratio. So if I achieve 75% of my sales quota, I'm going to get 75% of my incentive target. If I achieve 110%, I'm going to get 110%. What you might see happen is that reps might save revenue for the next period once they've met this quarter's or this half's, depending on your timeline's number. They may want to say, you know what, I don't want to risk hitting my threshold in the next period. I'm going to kind of delay on closing a couple of these deals so that they'll slide into the next period. You need to give consideration, though, to where you use accelerators based on the timing of your program. So what an accelerator essentially does is, usually what it will do is once you've reached 100% of target, additional revenue beyond that has a higher payout rate. So in my example I just gave where you get a 1-to-1 ratio, so from, let's say we've got a 60% threshold. From 60% achievement to 100% achievement, I'm going to get from 60% to 100% payout of my target incentive. Once I get past that 100%, I start earning at a higher rate. I may earn at a 2-to-1 ratio or a 3-to-1 ratio for incremental revenue I'm able to drive. But you need to think about the timing of when accelerators get activated because again, you don't want reps to kind of start gaming your system a little bit where they want revenue to intentionally slide into the next quarter because that will kick an accelerator in. Uh, I often use the expression with organizations that your sales reps are the best mathematicians in the company. They are really good at figuring out how to maximize the payout on their sales plan. And that's a good thing because if you design it well, sales compensation is all about incenting behavior, and it really does work. It's going to incent them to behave in a way that's going to maximize their payouts. But if you've got some design flaws, you could result in some unintended behaviors that aren't what you want. You may not want those reps sliding revenue into the next quarter because they know if I only get paid 1-to-1 on 90% of my target this quarter, but I can slide that other 10% and get paid at a 3-to-1 ratio for it in the next quarter, I make more money out of it. That may be the difference in you making or meeting your quarterly numbers, for example. Now, that being said, a recent study showed that there is real benefit in using accelerators. This was a study done by several universities in the United States, including Harvard University. And the results found that the use of accelerators drove over 13% higher revenues and 2% higher profit than sales comp models that did not include accelerators. So just looking at our case study company, they chose not to put a cap on payouts, but rather once a rep achieved 200% of target, which is a class A problem if that was the situation, they would see that their accelerator decelerated back down. So their program had a 1-to-1 payment up quota up to 100% achievement. Then beyond 100%, they had an accelerator of 3.5-to-1. So they wanted to really push reps to keep on going once you met 100% of your target. If they then got to 200% of their quota, it decelerated back down to just a 2-to-1 payout ratio. So again, I think a company that's seeing their reps achieving 200% of sales targets is probably going to be very happy to be paying out these reps at a slightly higher rate. So they chose not to cap it, but to decelerate things as you got up to that extremely overachieved result. They also chose not to put a threshold in place. They felt that there could be some demotivators involved with that resulted in them not wanting to do that. So they had a 1-to-1 payout ratio starting right at zero revenue. So the only way the rep would get no payout would be if they did not achieve a single bit of revenue during the year. Otherwise, it would be a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning if they achieved 50% of their quota, they would have a 50% payout. One of their thoughts was, if we were in a situation where we were seeing results that were at 50% of our revenue targets, we're going to have much bigger issues to deal with than the sales comp plan. We're probably going to be looking at major restructuring decisions. So rather than demotivate staff, they left that in with no threshold. The other risk of a threshold is you can have sales reps start to give up, where they see that their threshold's going to kick in. So why should I push for the remaining couple of months of the year? I know I'm not going to get a bonus anyway. So this prevents that type of mindset from kicking in. You need to think about how frequently you're going to administer your program. So this means how frequently are reps going to get paid out, and for what period are we going to have to set our sales targets and our quotas. So this is largely driven by the length of your sales cycle and your comfort level for being able to accurately forecast revenue. If you feel that you can do things on a quarterly cycle, there's a lot of benefits to doing that. You're getting that more immediate positive reinforcement to your sales team for the results they've achieved if they're getting paid on a quarterly basis. But again, if you find that you're challenged to forecast revenue on such a small time frame, you could end up having big volatility in your hit and miss of results quarter to quarter. It's also important to understand the impact of sales timing and revenue recognition, especially if there's accelerators built in. So there's the quote I used earlier. If you're administering on a quarterly basis, sales reps will know whether sliding some revenue into the next quarter might mean more money in their own pocket. So often you'll see companies that do use accelerators, they won't kick those in until year end. They'll look at a cumulative aspect for the accelerators so that it prevents any of this kind of potential gaming by somebody on the timing of their revenue. But I would say the key decision criteria for you here is how accurately are you able to forecast your revenue and what's your sales cycle, and that should drive how frequently you're going to administer the program. Another really key aspect, and possibly the most important aspect of a sales comp plan, is the goal setting. And here you're going to look at the number of goals and making sure you're not establishing any goal conflict in the process. So one of the main reasons you're implementing a sales program to begin with is because you want to drive behavior at the individual level that is going to lead to the positive execution of your sales strategy and therefore your corporate strategy. So you want to ensure that the measures you're putting in place are very aligned with your sales strategy. It's recommended that you go from 2 to 5 performance measures, so no less, no more. The only reason you would go less would probably be if you're just giving a straight revenue goal. And if that's the case, you're going to want to make sure you understand what the implications of that are, especially pending the level of control that is the salesperson has during this closing the sale. If you only go with revenue and you aren't looking at anything around profitability, operating margins, things like that, you run the risk of people just giving away product to drive revenue without the company making the level of margin on those that you want to make. So when you get to 2 goals, you can start balancing behaviors for things such as revenue and profitability. The reason you don't want to get up to anything more than 5 goals is it starts causing distraction for the individual. They're starting to get pulled in a lot of different directions potentially. You can have what's called goal dilution, where it's recommended you never have a goal that is weighted any less than 15% of the total incentive payout, because what you'll potentially have happen is salespeople will actually just disregard one of their goals if it's too smallly weighted. So if you've got a goal that's only weighted at 5%, for example, a sales rep may say, you know what, I'm not even going to focus on that goal, because if I just slightly overachieve on this other goal that's weighted at 55%, I'm going to more than make up for getting a 0 on that goal. So if it's something you truly want to try to incent some behavior around, you need to put enough weighting on it that it's going to make it meaningful to the rep and it's going to incent them to behave in that way. You want to be conscious of goal conflict, where different behaviors are being incented that may be in conflict with each other. I recently worked with an organization that was looking at bringing in a new CEO and was helping to set up some of the initial CEO goals for that organization. And one of the goals they were looking at putting in place was a goal around new customer revenue, specifically for the CEO. Luckily, I'd worked with them a little earlier and knew that they had a sales director, so their top sales guy had a very meaningful goal around increased revenue from existing clients. So there's an example of a goal conflict where this sales director has a very strong weighted goal to increase revenue from existing clients, yet his new boss was going to have a goal to push for bringing in new customers. So you want to make sure that your goals are aligned and you're not going to be causing confusion either for the same person or for members of your sales team versus each other potentially. As you get to more mature organizations where you're starting to get specialized sales roles, you can also get into more specialized performance measures, things like new customer and revenue growth, retention revenue, maybe specific goals around a new product or a strategic product. You can put in goals that are incenting around higher margin products. There's a lot of different things you can do with the goals, but the number one principle here is fundamentally a sales incentive plan is about incenting behaviors. So if you make it meaningful, this is what your sales guys are going to focus on. So it needs to be aligned with your strategy and it needs to be the things that you want them doing. So just quickly looking at our case study again, the organization chose to administer on a quarterly basis with performance targets and payouts occurring each quarter. They decided to go with 2 to 4 performance goals for the individuals involved. I think most of them ended up with 3. They were very heavily based on the corporate strategy and annual operating plan. And one of the interesting balancing goals that they utilized was that because of the nature of their business, where they had large and long multi-year contracts that they were negotiating with organizations, they put in goals that balanced both in-year revenue and total contract value. So they were aware that they had to think about what's the motivation of our salespeople when they're in front of a customer. If we're only focusing on in-year revenue, they may go and make a deal that's not in the best interest long-term for the company, but creates maybe a little bit more revenue this year because it's better for them. Or vice versa, if we're only focusing on total contract value, they may spread out a contract that ends up being of much bigger total value, but on a year-to-year value basis, the in-year revenue isn't going to help us meet our operating plan. Excuse me. So it's very important in the goal setting process, as I've mentioned earlier, is look at what kind of behavior are you trying to drive in your salespeople, and how are you going to align that with your corporate plan. So a couple more quick design characteristics. So clawbacks are commonly used, and this is done to address sales that end up getting canceled or don't end up in revenue collection. So if you've paid a commission or a bonus to somebody on an assumed sale and that sale does not end up happening, you may want to put in place a provision where the company is able to recoup that incentive that was paid out. That's a philosophical decision. Not everyone does it, but I think it's a pretty common design feature these days. To minimize the impact on the sales rep, you typically would have the repayment clawed out of future incentive payouts. So rather than actually having them write you a check back, you may just say, we're going to reduce your payout next quarter for this amount. A really important aspect when it comes to clawbacks, however, is make sure you clearly document the details and try to, wherever possible, minimize the gray zone around how it's going to work. Because as you can imagine, this is going to be a contentious aspect that's going to cause some dissatisfaction. You want to make it very clear up front to your salespeople that this is a possibility, and you want to make it as clear and definable as possible on how it's going to work whenever it does have to be applied. Final design component we'll talk about quickly is draws. So a draw is an opportunity to give a sales comp participant a temporary cash settlement. It's usually used when you are hiring a new sales rep, and because of the nature of sales comp, where you've got a smaller percentage of base salary and a higher earnings opportunity through the incentive component, you're recognizing that it's going to take maybe potentially a little bit of time for a sales rep to establish relationships, to come up to speed with clients on a new territory, whatever the case may be. And a draw is a way to recognize that by essentially advancing them some of their future incentive comp. It's also often used when you're moving someone from a corporate plan to a sales comp plan where there may be a corresponding decrease in salary. So there's 2 types of draws. One, an initial offset draw that's often used with a new rep. It's paid out as a lump sum, usually in the first month of the draw period. So in the first month of the quarter, for example, in a quarterly plan, usually about 25% of the incentive target. And then it's offset during that draw period by incentive comp that ends up being earned. So you're essentially giving them upfront a payment of 25% of their incentive plan for that quarter. And then when they do hopefully earn more than 25%, they'll get some incremental amount at the end of the period. This can be made recoverable or not recoverable, meaning if they ended up not earning enough to pay it back, or if they didn't earn as much as the draw amount, you wouldn't claw it back. You would say, you know what, you're new to the territory, you're new to this product. we're going to let you have a 25% incentive bonus this quarter, and we're not going to worry about it. A recoverable draw, on the other hand, is paid out over the draw period, usually on a monthly basis. Again, typically equal to about a quarter of the amount of the target bonus opportunity in the period. And it's recovered by the company either during the period or even beyond the period if necessary. And that's done through a clawback of future incentive payments. So in our case study, they introduced a standard clawback clause. They would recoup incentives paid for revenue that ended up not being recovered and earned. And they also implemented a draw for staff that were transitioning to the new program. So this was done to address the fact that there was a salary decrease for these individuals, and it was provided as a lump sum up front equal to the amount of the salary reduction. But then this lump sum was considered to be an advance on future incentive payouts and would be recovered as things moved forward. So some of the transition considerations to think about as you're moving now into your new sales comp program. When is the sales comp plan going to be introduced? It typically is recommended that you look anywhere from 12 to 18 months in advance of when you want to launch a full-scale sales comp program to start working on your transition considerations. This may be all the planning and design aspects. You may want to run a pilot for a period of time, but it's going to take some time to fully implement a program. And ideally, you want to launch your full-fledged program in line with a fiscal year as well. So depending on where you are when you get started vis-a-vis your fiscal year, you'll want to factor that in. Being aligned with your fiscal year is just going to help with things like goal setting, quotas, being aligned to your annual plan, and those types of things. You're going to want to think about how you're going to deal with adjusting salaries for any existing staff moving on to the new program, and we'll look at that in an upcoming slide. Make sure you're clear on your ability to understand and forecast demand and revenue in order to set revenue quotas. This will also factor into the timelines of how you're going to administer your program. And then some of the key transition considerations that you really need to plan for are: how are you going to document the roles, responsibilities, and processes that are involved? This is things like setting targets, goals, goal setting, communicating the plan terms, revenue recognition and administration, who's going to run the payroll. All of those things need to be planned and documented. And then who owns the change management strategy for the program? You need to train and educate the people involved, not only your salespeople, but those people involved with those roles that I just mentioned up above. You need to document procedures and then communicate to plan participants. So here's a very quick example of how you would move a non-sales employee onto a sales comp plan. So our employee, Joe, he's on a corporate program. He's got an $88,000 salary. He's at a manager level role. He has a 10% bonus target as part of the corporate plan. So his total comp each year is about $96,800 if he fully met his incentive. We look at the market for the TTC. So remembering that with sales comp, we administer on total compensation, and we see that the market for this type of sales role is in the area of $110,000 to $140,000 total target compensation. And peers in Joe's role are making about $110,000 to $125,000 within our own organization. So we look at Joe's experience, his expertise, his sustained level of performance, and we want to think, where do we want to position him in that market range? And we decide that 120,000 TC is the right place to position Joe to have him market competitive and internally competitive. We've decided that we've established a 40% target incentive comp for the role. So we look at that 120 TTC times 40%. That means he's going to have a $48,000 target incentive opportunity. So subtracting that from the 120 TTC, Joe's new base salary is $72,000. So he's got a $72,000 salary, a $48,000 incentive opportunity. So in this example, when we transition Joe off the corporate program, his salary ends up being reduced by $16,000, but his total annual earning opportunity on target performance has been increased by $23,000. So as you can see, there's going to be some communication planning and change management that's going to be needed to bring Joe on board. When you're going to introduce a program, we highly recommend that you develop a pilot program. So think about whether you're able to launch a pilot, a smaller scale program, maybe with less than your full amount of participants, or maybe you're going to just test things out over a portion of the year to really test out your design considerations and work out any issues that come out of this. It's going to be a chance to test and refine your administration processes, and no doubt there's going to be some bumps in the road. And you're going to be able to assess your results versus expectations. Did things work out the way we thought they would? Did the goals drive the intended behaviors, or were we surprised by some things? And then you can refine the program prior to fully launching on a full-scale basis based on the learnings that came out of the pilot program. So in our case study, they did run a pilot program. It involved 5 very senior revenue-generating employees. Each was transitioned over to sales comp. And as I mentioned, there was decreased salaries as a result. They did this by having a transitional comp plan for the last half of the year, heading into the new year's for the full launch of the program. Each person was given comp plan agreements, which outlined the basic terms of the program, helped with some of the change management, and they got a lot of learnings out of this pilot. They realized that they were not really able to administer things on a quarterly basis, and they ended up going to a half-year program for their full program when they launched fully. They found out that their forecasting ability and their revenue collection processes just weren't going to work on a quarterly basis. They realized that there was some dissatisfaction amongst the participants for having their salaries reduced. There was a bit of an entitlement mentality where they wanted to keep their salaries and just get the earnings upside. And this became a big change management initiative. And it was really important that they had senior management on board who were able to help work through that process. And then they learned several things on the administration of the program itself, where they had to refine some of the processes that had been laid out. So I realize that we're short on time, so I won't go into that in any more detail, but I'm happy to follow up with anybody individually if you want to contact me afterwards to just talk about more some of the learnings that this organization found. Sorry, my slide has stalled, but I know we are into the home stretch here. So just finally, preparing to administer the program. You need to really make sure the finance group understands their role. You've got procedures in place. They know what they need to do around revenue targets, helping set quotas, the revenue recognition program, how draws are going to be administered if you're using them, how you're going to make sure people get paid accurately and on time. The old saying, a first impression is a lasting impression, is very true. And if you launch a sales comp program and you are paying your sales guys inaccurately or late, or there's other issues, you're going to have real challenges getting that to be a successful program. Understand how you're going to administer and manage clawbacks. And a really strongly recommended part of your program should be to establish a dispute resolution committee. This is typically made up of somebody out of HR, somebody out of sales, maybe somebody out of legal, somebody out of finance. And if you do have disputes over how quota achievement was assessed, how revenue was recognized, whether there were clawbacks needed, this committee is a body that can come to a decision on that. So just finally, to wrap up, an implementation tip sheet, which is just really a summary walkthrough of everything that we've covered. So make sure you're engaging your key stakeholders throughout the design and the implementation. They're going to be your feet on the ground and provide you with really important insights. And they're also going to be able to champion things for you as you move forward, because having them involved throughout the process, you've hopefully got their buy-in throughout. Determine your design considerations. The list is there, all the ones we walked through. Really important to map out your transition plan. When are you going to introduce this program? How are you going to deal with any changes of salaries for your existing staff? And make sure you document roles, responsibilities, processes on how you're going to administer this new program. It's going to be new work and new responsibilities for many people. So you need to make sure they're clear on what their role is, what their responsibilities are, where the integration is within the organization, and then who owns the change management strategy. Develop and run a pilot if you can. As I mentioned, the case study organization gleaned great learnings out of running a pilot, and were able to implement insights gained from the pilot into their full-fledged launch of the program. And then finalize all your administration requirements. Make sure those procedures are documented. Make sure you've created comp plan templates, communication materials, things like that, so that as you have your program ready to launch, it's going to come across as a polished and well thought out program. Unfortunately, we're right up against the clock here to end the meeting, and I know that I've got several questions that have come in via the chat group. What I'll do is, if anyone would like me to send out to you, following up on this, a FAQ sheet based on the questions that have come in, I'll be happy to do that. So just email me and I'll send that out to you. In fact, I'll send it out to all participants who are here today. So just for the sake of realizing many of you have more meetings to get to, I don't want to run over time. I'll go through all of the questions that have been sent in and send you back an FAQ sheet with answers to those questions. And happy for you to send me any additional questions directly via email. Just as a reminder, my email address is mike.damico, so that's D-A-M-I-C-O, no apostrophe, at stratfordmanagers.com. So mike.damico@stratfordmanagers.com. Let me know if you're also interested in the slides, and I'll be happy to send those to you as well. So thank you very much for your time. Sorry that I rushed through things a little here at the end, but good luck with those of you that are looking to launch a sales comp program. It can be such an impactful business tool for an organization if done correctly. And for those of you that are looking at retooling your current program, I think many of the principles and items we talked about today are certainly applicable. And of course, if any of you can use any help, don't hesitate to contact myself or Stratford. I've certainly done a lot of sales comp work. We also have a sales practice that not only gets involved in sales compensation decisions, but works with sales organizations to develop skills, provides workshops and training to sales personnel. Stratford can help you with strategy sessions around your sales organization. So keep us in mind for any help we can give you in any area of maximizing what you're able to get out of your sales organization. So thanks very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.